Areena.
This week, after Volodymyr Zelensky visited Helsinki, we're asking why Finland and Ukraine have such a strong relationship. Hello and welcome to All Points North. I'm Egan Richardson.
I'm Zena, Iovino, and today we're breaking down the implications of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's surprise visit to Finland. It was a busy day on all fronts this Wednesday as Zelensky made an unexpected trip to Finland. And his visit to Helsinki came at a pivotal moment, just one day after U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin supposedly agreed on a temporary 30-day ceasefire. Not that really worked out, but more on that later.
So what was Zelensky doing in Finland? The key takeaway was strengthening European defence ties. Now Finland, which has been ramping up its own security, has been stepping up to help Ukraine since the Russian invasion. Finland's been one of the world's top military aid donors to Ukraine. The upshot of this visit was reinforced defence cooperation between the two countries, and there was also an agreement on Finland helping Ukraine to build civil defence shelters.
But the main point, of course, was to re-emphasize the warm relations between the two countries after a bruising few weeks for Zelensky. You may have seen the uncomfortable scenes at the White House when Donald Trump and his sidekick J.D. Vance attacked Zelensky and diminished Ukraine. There was no chance of that in Helsinki.
The visit began with a fair amount of pomp and ceremony. Zelensky and his wife, Zena, were greeted with a serenade from a military band. The Ukrainian national anthem there. Stubbs suggested that Zelensky's visit was ad hoc, and this informal tone cast the whirlwind visit in a friendly light. Against this backdrop, Zelensky's trip was as much about optics as it was about strategy, showing that Ukraine continues to build its own alliances.
But as so often before, I think we wouldn't be here was it not for our wives, because I think the original idea was that the two of them would have a meeting here, and then we ended up meeting, and I think in very much an opportune time.
But beyond the pageantry, Stubb didn't mince words. He emphasized that keeping up pressure on Russia is key to ending the war on terms favorable to Ukraine.
Yes, let's not forget that Finland itself actually joined NATO in response to Russian security threats after the full-scale invasion.
There are times when you know that the world is at a turning point. Right now, we're facing one of those moments or choices between two different worlds, Yalta or Helsinki. In other words, spheres of influence or equal rights and duties for all states. And I do always have to stress that Yalta is Ukrainian.
The Ukrainian president made lots of stops on his tour, including Parliament, where he got a standing ovation. There were formal discussions on bilateral relations with Prime Minister Petteri Orpo, who gifted him a bespoke watch made from a destroyed Russian tank.
Talk about a symbolic gift.
Indeed, but why is Finland such a resonant location for Ukraine's head of state? Why is there such universal support for Ukraine's struggle here? I asked Tytti Tuppurainen, the chair of the Social Democrats parliamentary group, what it means to Finland when Zelensky comes to town.
So, Tytti Tuppurainen, why is it that Volodymyr Zelensky gets such a warm reception in Finland? It's kind of different to how he's received in other countries.
Well, perhaps there are basically two reasons for that. The first being obviously Zelensky's own personality. He's a very impressive person, given the fact that he's been leading a country that is in a real war for more than 3 years now, and still he's such a warm human being and has been able to maintain his optimistic stance vis-à-vis other people and other leaders. We simply admire him. He's a role model as a politician and as a political leader. And the second reason, in my opinion, is the fact that we Finns, we have a lot of empathy towards Ukrainians who have been fighting against an aggressor who's waging an illegal war, which is preaching against UN Charter. That's a wrong thing in the world, and we know Russia is a neighboring country to us. If Russia can do that to Ukraine, then perhaps it could do that against us. We have a very severe history with Russia, and therefore we understand how difficult and how terrible the situation in Ukraine is.
So there's really strong support for Ukraine.
Definitely. There are 9 parties in the Finnish parliament, and all the leaders of the political groups were having coffee together with President Zelensky, and there were no party that would be critical towards our support for Ukraine. All the parties in the Finnish parliament, be it a government party or the opposition parties, we are all unanimous when it comes to support to Ukraine.
Is there a sense that we need to step up that support now? As the United States is taking a step back, perhaps, from Europe and from Ukraine?
That's urgent. That's an urgent matter. We have to take it seriously, what the United States is saying. Donald Trump and his administration is distancing itself from Europe and from Ukraine. That's a reality. Of course, we would like to do it together with the United States, but if not together with the United States, then we have to do it alone as Europe, European Union plus United Kingdom and Norway. We have to provide Ukraine with the security guarantees it needs in order to contain Russia's aggression.
Yeah. And what comes next on that front? Are there any practical measures you can talk about that Finland wants to take and that it is able to take to kind of not decouple exactly, but to prepare for disengagement from the US?
We are not decoupling from the United States. Actually, we would like to show the United States that it's in the interest of the United States to stay as a very close ally to Europe. The United States needs strong allies, and now that we are investing in our own capabilities, in our own defense industry, and in our own deterrence here on this continent, it's actually good for the United States. So I believe that at the end of the day, we remain as partners and as allies. But in the short term, it seems that there is a distance, and we should not let Russia utilize this for its own purposes, which are imperialistic and aggressive.
And that was Tytti Tuppurainen. Now, Stubb's wife, Suzanne, also took First Lady Olena Zelenska alongside Education Minister Anders Adlercreutz to primary school in Kirkkonummi, which is, of course, Adlercreutz's hometown. So there was also lots of talk of educational cooperation with Ukraine. And after all of this, they went down into a bunker, and there was an agreement on Finland helping Ukraine build civil defense shelters.
Stubb and Zelensky also had a session at the University of Helsinki. Now, while his jam-packed day was unfolding, some very real things were happening for Zelensky back home. On Wednesday, Russia and Ukraine exchanged 175 prisoners of war in a deal made by Trump and Putin. Here in Helsinki, Stubb didn't sound too pleased about Ukraine being left outside of discussions concerning its own future.
It's quite clear now that Ukraine wants peace and a ceasefire. Finland wants peace and a ceasefire. Europe wants peace and a ceasefire. The United States wants peace and a ceasefire. And now the puck is in the Russian zone. You know, we're not sure whether they actually want that. We have to remember that Ukraine has approved the ceasefire without any kind of conditions. And yesterday's conversation proved that Putin would not be willing to do that. His ceasefire is very partial. It only touches upon energy and infrastructure. It depends on how you actually define it. So now we just have to hope that the American efforts, and especially the efforts of President Trump, will continue to put pressure on Russia. That is the key at this particular moment, which in my mind, of course, means that you need to increase the sanctions, you need to use the frozen assets, and you need to continue arming Ukraine in order for Russia to understand that it cannot postpone the ceasefire or the peace negotiations anymore.
Minutes after Zelensky's session at the university ended, he had that call with Trump. There were some reports that he was visibly preoccupied when sitting on stage at the university. After the call, there was news of Trump and Zelensky saying they had had a positive chat, with Zelensky asking for additional U.S. air defense support.
Back at the university, Stubbs said a Ukrainian victory was in Finland's own strategic interest.
What we need to understand sort of mentally is that Ukrainian security is the core and key part of European security. And it is in our interest that there are strong security arrangements in Ukraine so as to prevent Russia from doing this ever again. There are many reasons why we support Ukraine. The most important are the principled and values-based reasons, because we have an affinity with what's going on in Ukraine. We share the values, and we share Ukraine's European and Western aspirations. But then there's also the interest part. It is in all of our vested interests that Ukraine wins this war.
So, where does this leave us? The next few weeks could be critical as Ukraine looks to Europe. That hyped partial ceasefire in Ukraine, brokered by Trump and Putin, lasted 1 hour.
Hearing Stubb there, he's talking about how Finland fits into a changed security environment. With Trump's recent handling of Ukraine, Europe is feeling more on its own. I talked to Yle reporter Mikko Mäkäläinen to get his take.
So, Mikko Mäkäläinen, you're currently in Washington, D.C. on a reporting trip for Yle. I just wanted to ask you, do you think the United States can be a reliable ally in the future for Finland and Europe and Ukraine? Or has something changed irrevocably with the Trump presidency?
I think we're so early in the Trump presidency that it's impossible to know for sure. I mean, as far as Finland goes, I don't think we have any concrete evidence to claim that the US would not be a reliable ally. I think the question for Finland is whether the Trump administration and Russia are getting along a bit too well now and in the future, because realistically, Finland in any situation would not have any other enemy aside from potentially Russia. So if Russia and the US are getting too close, that would be a problem for us. But I believe that any country's defense policy is not dependent on just one outside actor, but Finland also has a plan B and also powerful allies within NATO inside Europe. Now, as for Ukraine, it's still also a bit difficult to say how much of Trump's attitude and comments regarding Ukraine and Russia are the negotiation tactic, and how deeply he sort of feels that the Ukraine should be more thankful to the US, should make more concessions and so forth, as he's been demanding, while at the same time doesn't look like he would be demanding a whole lot from President Putin. So, I mean, currently, if we look at what's happening on the ground, the US has resumed intelligence support for Ukraine and is not impeding the arms deliveries that were already agreed during the Biden administration, but will take months and years, will go on for months and years, unless Trump somehow disrupts them. But if we also only look at what's happening on the ground, currently the US is being an ally to Ukraine and Finland.
And that was Mikko Mäkäläinen in Washington, D.C.
Preparations are meanwhile underway for a new round of Russia-US talks on Monday in Saudi Arabia, with Ukraine also sending representatives there to meet with American officials. And now it's time for a roundup. The commander of the Finnish Air Force has dismissed concerns that F-35 fighter jets from the United States might have a so-called kill switch that would allow the U.S. to disable the jets by halting software updates. Major General Timo Herranen said that the discussion should focus on expanding European defense production.
Prosecutors appealed the ruling in the case of Vojislav Tordin, a Russian convicted by a Finnish court of committing war crimes in Ukraine. He was convicted on 4 counts and acquitted on 1, and prosecutors have said they want to appeal the 5th verdict.
Pirkanmaa District Court has upped the compensation the state must pay to a man found not guilty of committing war crimes in the late 90s and early 2000s. A Sierra Leonean national living in Tampere was awarded €390,000 in damages last summer because he spent a total of 709 days behind bars before his acquittal.
The Consumer Ombudsman says that Finnair is not allowing customers enough time to file claims for refunds. Delayed passengers have 2 months to ask the company for compensation, but the Ombudsman says that deadline is too short and has asked the Market Court to intervene.
People in Finland returned a record 2.3 billion bottles and cans for recycling last year. That's the highest number on record. Lapland has the most enthusiastic deposit bottle collectors, while cities in the south are a bit lazier about taking back the empties.
Finland's Data Protection Ombudsman is launching an investigation into Helsinki University's transfer of data to a Chinese gene technology company. Questions have arisen regarding human research sample data.
The US is seeking European egg imports amid shortages, but Finnish egg ports to the country would face regulatory hurdles.
That's an excellent story, Zena.
Indeed.
It is street dust season and Helsinki is feeling the effects. Some areas with heavy traffic have poor to very poor air quality as snow and ice melt away and roads get dustier.
And finally, in more seasonal news, Finland will now see longer days than nights as the spring equinox arrived this week. Daylight hours will continue to grow until the summer solstice on June 21st or midsummer.
Are you feeling spring-like this week, Zena? Is it?
Spring-like and some pollen allergies and everything that comes with that street dust.
Oh, look on the bright side. It's nice to have a bit more light around the place, I find.
Our last show dealt with some of the problems people can face in restarting their careers in Finland when moving here with their partners. That show seemed to resonate with many in our audience, including Anna. She wrote in on WhatsApp to thank us for bringing up what she called highly critical issues for professionals contemplating a move here. So thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Anna, indeed. There really are critical issues. But let's move on to our regular feature, Ask Us Anything. This is where we take one question from the audience and try to find an answer. This week, it's something that I've been asked multiple times across multiple platforms. Is Finland really the happiest country in the world?
Right. This is about Finland ranking as the happiest or the most content country in the world for the 8th consecutive year. Denmark, Iceland, and Sweden trailed behind Finland in the annual World Happiness Report. Now, this always causes some consternation as Finns are, how shall we put it, not the most adept at expressing their emotions.
You can say that again.
Do they look happy?
People express happiness in different ways. It's not always through facial expressions or smiling or greeting people as you walk past them in the street. But anyway, I asked Katja Liukkonen, a producer here for the Arabic and Somali news services, what she made about the World Happiness Survey. So Katja Liukkonen, is Finland really the happiest country in the world?
Well, as a Finnish person, I have to say that I'm very skeptical, as probably everyone else in Finland as well. I feel that, happiness in Finland means being content with what you have. And maybe the life in Finland is very convenient and very easy compared to other countries. So maybe that's another thing. But in my opinion, that also relates to the fact that Finnish people might not be very ambitious in terms of, like, compared to other countries, when you really need to, like, you have to strive for more and, like, to be successful. Whereas in Finland, like, if you're not very successful, you can live a comfortable life, and that's totally fine. Your kids go to free school, free daycare,
free university. Yes. So you can just live comfortably and don't have to sweat all day at work. Isn't that the secret to a good life?
Is it? I think for some people it might be a good life, but I mean, for some people, me included, it might be a bit boring.
Okay, so you crave a little bit of excitement that you might get elsewhere in the world.
Yes, I think the comfort and the comfort might be a very good thing, but also it lacks excitement. So it sets this dual struggle that I have in my head.
And it looks like we've reached the end of another show. The weekend's almost here. I'm going to be getting out and about in this spring-like weather. Do you have a streaming tip for us this weekend, Zena?
Of course I do. And in line with the political theme of today's show, I thought Wolf Hall was a nice fit to round off the week. Arena is streaming an adaptation of Hilary Mantel's historical drama chronicling the rise of Thomas Cromwell. He was a son of a humble blacksmith who became King Henry VIII's chief advisor in the corridors of power in the Tudor court.
That sounds like a timely watch. And that's about all we have time for today, so thanks for listening, and thanks to our audio engineer today, Panu Willman. Bye.
Bye.